Late 1950s, Montauk, Camp Hero. The place was supposed to be empty, just a shut-down job before the storm rolled in. But the air smelled wrong, like wet cages and rust. The radios hissed, vents breathed, and locals whispered about things that crawl out of the surf. Then, one night, a soldier vanished by the generator, blood by the drain, no body, just black water below. We thought it was an accident, until we found the cages, the records, and the word specimens burned into the walls. That's when we learned something down there never left, and it was hungry. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. I'll keep it straight. I was a private then. Fresh boots, hair still high and tight like a damned recruiting poster. Cold War years. Late 50s. We were on the far end of Long Island. Montauk, Camp Hero. Old coastal guns turned to rust. Half the fences sagged, wind pushed salt into your teeth. The kind of place the Army forgets until somebody signs a paper and says, "Go mop it up." Our orders were dumb simple on paper. Final security patrol. Inventory sealed underground sectors before shutdown. Turn keys, count boxes, sign sheets, clear out. Captain Reed Marshall had the clipboard in the kind of posture that makes you straighten your back even when you're dead tired. He didn't waste words. He said the job, we said Roger, and that was that. Sergeant Cole ran the floor most days, 20 years in. Old knuckles like walnuts. He knew when to bark and when to let you eat. He had that slow way of talking, like he'd seen the stupid already and didn't want to be surprised by it twice. He'd done time around experiments, his word. Said it like a hot stove you never grabbed twice. Never got specific. Corporal Diaz hauled the radio. Skinny guy, nervous hands, could solder a wire blindfolded. He hated the sea air because it clogged everything with salt. He said it like a prayer, every hour, salt kills gear. He kept a little notebook in his breast pocket, wrote down frequencies, weather, dumb jokes we made. He said, writing made things stay honest. I don't know about honest, but it made them stick. I was with Private Harris, younger than me by a year but looked 10 younger when he pulled off his helmet. Wide eyes. He could shoot sure as a switch, but he spoke easy. The kind of kid who turns his head when wind talks in grass. We gave him grief. He took it because he wanted in. The Army teaches you to pretend you like the taste of fear. He was learning. We arrived by truck in the afternoon, late, with the sky slate and the ocean crawling. Radar tower on the bluff like a bent jawbone. Big dish, bird shit everywhere, paint peeling. Someone had left a half-rusted sign tied to a chain-link gate. No trespassing. The chain clinked in the wind, but the lock was already open. Captain Reed pointed with his pencil. We set camp here. Tower gives us height. Good eyes on the water. Cole, you take inventory teams. I want doors checked. Mark sealed with grease pencil. Diaz, set the radio. Call in hourly. Cole nodded once. Copy. We unpacked. Tents up across cracked asphalt. Lines tied to old mount bolts for the big dish. You could smell the ocean like a wet dog. We had bedrolls, coffee tins, a couple cases of rations that tasted like cardboard and regret. Weapons were simple. Rifles we trusted. Pistols we cleaned with quiet hands. We had a couple bags of flares, a satchel with charges, and one box of blasting caps that looked older than coal. Camp Hero had levels. You got the tired buildings up top, teeth missing. Barracks with busted doors. Offices with filing cabinets full of ghosts. And then you had the holes. Steel stairs down from gun pits. Heavy doors with wheels on them. Tunnel mouths bricked up and then welded again for good measure. The kind of seals that say, we mean it. We did the first sweep before dark. Marked doors, chalk numbers, called them up to Diaz, who scratched in his book and clicked the mic. Montauk Tower to station, inventory commencing, over. Station crackled back from somewhere inland. Unclear. He shrugged. Storm's coming. Might mess with it. We set the tents near the radar base. There were vents there, thick steel pipes stuck up out of the ground like organ pipes slanted by wind. You could hear air moving slow way down below, and something else. A faint note. You know how a bottle hums when you blow across it. Like that, off key. Not loud enough to notice, except once you noticed it, you couldn't not. A smell came with it too. Not rot, not sewage. Something like a wet animal cage that hadn't been cleaned, acid on the tongue. We ate with our backs to the wind, coffee hot and thin. Reed passed the duty roster. I drew second watch with Harris. He made a face and tried not to. Cole smirked and told him he'd live to see dawn if he kept his eyes open and his mouth shut. The sun died quick. The tower turned into a black skeleton. The ocean breathed below. If you've never slept by the Atlantic with clouds as low as your eyelids, you don't know how loud quiet can get. I lay there listening to canvas flap and the dish creak. Diaz snored like a busted muffler. Reed wrote something by flashlight and then clicked the light off like cutting a wire. I watched Vents shiver, smelled that animal sting. I told myself it was normal. Abandoned places keep their own breath. You tell yourself a lot of stuff until it stops working. Harris nudged me around midnight. You up? Yeah. Smells like the zoo. Go walk a lap. Warm your legs. We took turns. Camp Hero watched us the way a closed mouth watches a dentist. We moved slow, checked our lines, checked the generator, checked the far fence where it dipped, and then disappeared in the blackberry thorns. The fence ended at the cliff. You could hear waves slap rocks, like meat on a board. After a while, I sat on a sandbag, rifle across my knees, and thought about nothing. That's a skill the Army trains better than shooting. Around the last hour before dawn, wind shifted. The smell deepened. I heard the vent hum change tone. Maybe pressure. Maybe nothing. I told myself nothing and kept telling it until the sun pushed gray into the world. Normal, I said. It's all normal. It wasn't. We got locals that morning. 2 old fishermen and 1 kid in a cable knit sweater too big for him. They stood outside the fence like birds at a wire and said they were walking the beach for driftwood. The older one stared past us at the tower like a man remembering a debt. He had the kind of face you only get from years at sea and bad whiskey. Base ain't shut, he asked. Soon, said Reed. You seen folks around here? Kids? Vandals? The old man shrugged. No, not wise to walk here. He tapped his nose. Wind's wrong. Dogs won't come near, Cole asked. Dogs, deer, you name it. He squinted. Fishermen been missing. 2 boats. Coast Guard says engine trouble. I say they went too close to the outflow. Current's funny by the point. What outflow? Diaz asked. The old man jerked his chin at a chunk of shoreline half masked by grass. Old pipe. Water comes and goes. When it goes, it sucks. He spat. This place ain't right. Appreciate it, Reed said like he did, and walked them off the fence with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. After they left, Diaz turned his radio knob again. Interference is dog shit today. Hear that? He held it to my ear. The static had a metallic taste, a whine that came and went like Morse without rhythm. He shook his head. Salt, storm, sunspots, I don't care. It's busted. We swept buildings. Barracks were empty of anything but old mattresses and mouse crap. A chow hall had plates stacked in rusty water like a still life from hell. An office had 1 safe open and a note inside that said, in pencil, "Don't look for what isn't yours." Reed found that and made no face at all. He cuffed the safe door shut and moved on. At lunch, Cole sent me and Harris down to check vents. Take a flashlight and you're good luck, he said. We walked the line of pipes like they were graves. The hum was steadier in daylight, the smell stronger. On 1 vent cap, 3 claw scratches ran the width of my palm. Fresh, bright steel under the rust. I ran a finger on them and felt a burr. I looked around for a tool, kids with knives, anything. Nothing but grass and wind and our footprints. Hey, Harris said. He pointed into the scrub, fur and bones. Fox, maybe. Stripped neat. No bullet holes. No teeth left on the skull. The bones were clean, like boiled. Only they hadn't been boiled. Flies came late, like they didn't want it either. We brought Cole to it. He squatted, grunted once, and stood. Marked the area. No wandering alone. He didn't make it a big thing. That was his trick. He kept us moving like he'd seen this sort of bad before. Near evening, Diaz's Geiger counter clicked once and then went silent. He banged it with his knuckles. It made a noise like a coin dropped down a well. He frowned. Batteries are good. Sun flares, I said, because that's what the papers said whenever anything went sideways. He made a note in his book. We did another round of doors. Most had the welds. A few had been welded twice. We chalked numbers, and on one door the chalk didn't show because the steel was oily. Harris said, "What's that on the seam?" and put his nose close. I yanked him back. The seam oozed a thin sheen of something like spit and glue. It ran and then stopped, like breath on cold metal. I wiped it with a rag. It came away clear. I dropped the rag and didn't pick it up. That night, the wind fell completely. No waves, no flags, nothing. The tower stood like a dead thing. The generator's engine sounded too loud for the space. We took shifts again. I walked the fence and thought about the locals, the pipe, the outflow. I breathed shallow. The air had turned sweet and wrong. Around midnight, a metallic sound echoed from below. Not a pipe settling, not a door shifting. This was a cage sound. I know cages. The metal note you get when something hits bars with meat and bone behind it. It came once, then again further away. Then something else moved. A scrape like wet hands on concrete. I leaned over a vent and heard breathing. Deep, slow, not human slow, lower. Like a drum you feel more than hear. I stood there a long minute. Told myself it was pressure. Told myself it was wind. Told myself I was a fool for listening. Then I went and woke Cole. I said, "Sergeant, something's walking down there." He didn't say, "Don't be dumb." He didn't say, "Go sleep." He just rubbed his jaw and stared at the dark vent mouths. He said, "Tomorrow we open a door." Morning came slow and flat. Cole picked the door like he knew it already. Lower stairwell off a gun pit marked Sector C wheel handle. Rusted, but the weld beads around the edge were clean, newer than the door. A sign stenciled above it in letters small enough you had to squint. Bio-containment Sector C. Reed didn't like it. You could see it in his shoulders. But the inventory sheet had a line for Sector C, and the key list had a number, and he wasn't the kind of officer to skip a line because the wind said boo. We cut the welds. Torch threw spatter. Sparks spit and died on wet concrete. The smell off the seam turned awful as it warmed, like burned hair and bleach. We opened the wheel with all of us leaning, the metal sighing like something relieved to be free. Inside, the light gave up after 10 feet. We shot flashlights and the beams looked thin like smoke. The floor was tiled once, slick now with a sheen like oyster slime. There were cages on the left, big ones, bars thick as thumbs. Doors hung open or off hinges. Water dripped. Somewhere a drain gurgled like a throat. We moved careful. Reed up front with his pistol tight to his chest. Cole behind with the rifle. Me and Harris on either side. Diaz in back with the radio hung like a baby he had to protect. The cages had numbers. One said 4, one said 7. We shined lights in and saw scratches on concrete. Deep ones that arced the way a man would reach if his arms bent wrong. We found a desk stuck to the wall with rust. Paper under glass, streaks like someone had tried to wipe it clean and gave up. Diaz pried the glass with his knife. Under it, a set of typed sheets yellowed to hell. Genetic adaptation under isolation stress. Words too long for soldiers and a stamp across the bottom. Defense Research Branch. Another line in pencil, faint. Do not feed after lights out. Reed turned the sheet with 2 fingers. Jesus. Diaz found a logbook on a lower shelf. He opened it and read while the radio hissed on his back. Specimens 4 through 7 hostile. Relocation to deep tunnel. Awaiting transport. The last page had a date near the start of the decade. Thin ink scrawled like the writer's hand shook. Below the date was one more line. Whoever reads this, lock the vents. We found the body in a small side room. White lab coat, black now with mold and time. Bones crushed, but still holding shape under the cloth like sticks in a sack. A tag around the neck, rusted chain, name lasered on a bit of plate. Dr. H. Learner. Mouth a dark hole full of dirt. No arms. Not cut clean. Torn. The coat sleeve wound tight at the shoulder like someone had chewed a rope. Harris stared a second too long and I pushed him back out without saying anything I'd have to live with. He was sweating through his shirt, though it was cold as a fridge down there. We all were. We kept moving all the way to a corridor that sloped down. The paint changed there. Older, green-gray. The tiles grew thicker, like whoever built this part had more money and less time. The smell thickened until we tasted it like soup. Reed looked at Cole. Cole shook his head once. "We don't go deeper with 4 guns and bad lighting." He said it not like an order, but like maybe he was begging the world to agree. We backed out, closed the wheel door, welded it again, this time with fresh bead. Reed told Diaz to call it in. He did. The radio crackled. He tried 3 freaks. He said letters and numbers that mean, "We have a thing." The static said no. The sky outside wore a thicker cloud. We posted a guard at the stairwell. That was me and Harris. Above, the vents hummed. By afternoon, someone screamed outside the perimeter. A woman's scream, clear as a bell. We ran toward it, both of us, before anyone could stop us. You hear a scream like that and your feet go. We hit the fence and saw nothing but grass and scrub. The scream came again, farther away this time, like it wanted us to chase it to the edge. Cole pulled us back by our collars like we were kids too near a well. "No hero work," he said, and his eyes were tired. Night brought fog from the sea and a darkness that ate the beam of a flashlight at 10 feet. At 2 in the morning, Harris went to take a leap behind the generator shed. He didn't come back on time. 5 minutes. 10. I thought he was nervous and his guts were giving him hell. I went around the corner. The ground was wet like it always is near a generator. I saw his cigarette glowing in a smear on the gravel like somebody had dragged it. No Harris. I called his name. Quiet, then louder. Nothing. The fog didn't even give me the echo back. I ran to get Cole. We fanned out with lights and rifles and our hearts beating like hammers. We found a smear of blood leading to a storm drain grate. The bars were bent like pretzels. The blood ended at the lip. I lay on my belly and shined the light down. The beam hit water, a slick surface that breathed back at me with fog. I said his name again and got the ocean in reply. We lost a man on a base that was supposed to be empty. We didn't run. That's not what you do. We pulled in tight. We stacked sandbags at the tunnel door. We put flares on tripwires. We breathed shallow, tasted iron, and waited for the part where we shoot or die. We went down into Sector C again at first light because that's what we are. We go after our own. We move with lines tied around our waist this time. Reed on point. Me next. Cole, then Diaz. The radio hissed like a snake ready to bite his ear. The corridor past the cages held still air that felt wrong on the skin. Not cold, greasy. Like being licked by a dead thing. We tracked a skid mark. Blood, but thin, like someone had tried to wash it. It went to the sloped corridor and down. The floor there had grooves cut in it, shallow channels to carry water away. The water that day ran backward, slow, like the whole building was breathing in. We followed. We found a junction. One branch blocked by a bulkhead door half collapsed, another open in black. The walls bore painted words, "Deep tunnel." The paint had run as if it had cried once and never stopped. The smell of animal cage grew strong enough to sting eyes. Under it, a smaller smell of fuel and burned insulation. A generator somewhere below us, trying to cough itself alive. Diaz's radio died with a pop. He slapped it, cursed, swapped battery. Nothing. He clicked the mic and it clicked back like someone on the other end was pressing it without a mouth. We spread out to cover as well as the place would let us. Reed lifted a hand and placed it on the wall. He felt the vibration before I did. A thump. Another. Off-tempo. Heavy and light together the way 4 legs sound when they land wrong. We killed our lights at the same time without talking and waited with our backs up, letting our eyes do what they could, the dark pulse between lightning strikes far above. Each flash cut a picture of the corridor, stuttered, gone. It came around a bend at a crouch. Pale skin stretched like wax over a long skull. No hair, no real nose, just slits above a mouth that wasn't right. The jaw looked dislocated and then found a new place to stay. Teeth like splinters. It walked on 4 limbs, but the front ones had hands. The fingers had nails that had turned to claws from use, like a carpenter's hard skin. Only these could open a hog. The eyes were the worst because they weren't black demon holes. They were gray, small, and focused, like a butcher who just wants the cut done right. Reed fired first. 1 shot, center mass. It took the hit and jerked and then came fast. I fired. Cole fired behind my shoulder. It hit the floor like sacks of wet cloth. Streamed. The sound made my teeth buzz. It sounded human for a beat, high and begging. Then it dropped into a growl that shook bolts out of memory. It spun and hauled itself back on all fours down the corridor. Blood smeared like oyster soup, slick and heavy, but the color was wrong. Too pale, like watered ketchup. We didn't chase. Cole said nope, and we all obeyed. We backed up slow, guns out, and dragged coil line with our heels. We sealed the door again. Welded, sandbagged. We looked at each other like men who had seen the deep end of a well move. The air topside was thick and sour. The sky pressed down. We tried the radio again. Dead. The generator coughed. Then it stopped, then started, then stopped. When it stopped for the last time, the tower groaned like a ship. Lights went dark across the base. We were alone. The only sound was the ocean and the small metal notes of the vents when wind caught them. Reed stood us in a circle and talked flat like he always did. We hold here, no one alone. We don't go chasing anything into its home. We kill whatever comes in reach, and we don't waste rounds. Cole added, stack cans at the doors. Make a ring of trip flares, set the claymore by the stairs. He looked at Reed when he said claymore, because technically we weren't supposed to have it on a base that was being shut orderly. Reed didn't blink. Do it. We learn things you don't want in a place like this. We learned that the creatures knew our lines as fast as we set them. They didn't test where we watched. They tested where wind blew and our eyes watered. We'd hear cans rattle far side and go to cover it, and a minute later a vent cover would ping near the generator. They were patient and they were mean. They'd work things the way rats work a pantry. Push, wait, learn. In a storage bay behind the tower, Diaz found a box of old paper, back when the army wrote sins in triplicate. He skimmed and read out loud while we taped flares to wire. Primates. Radiation resistance trials. Isolation to reduce stress response to alarms. Behavior modification via nutrient cycles. He paused. Nutrient cycles? Feeding, Cole said. They tried to make soldiers who could work near hot zones. Maybe they started with chimps. Maybe they didn't stop there. Diaz turned a page. Cross notes list human trial staff as volunteers. He said the last word like it was a sore tooth. Reed didn't like his men thinking about volunteers. Done reading, he said. Diaz folded the paper and slid it in his breast pocket behind the little book. Later, he told me he couldn't help it. He was the kind who had to keep the thread in hand even if the weave cut him. Rain came. The vents sang a little higher. The smell turned sweeter. If Ron had a dessert course, this was it. Night fell again because of course it did. We posted 2 and 2 inside the tower bay. We put Harris's name on the board and drew a line through it and didn't say anything out loud. The thing about fear is that it makes you dumb if you let it. Cole didn't let it. He kept us moving, cleaning, checking, acting like there was always a next task, so we didn't sink. They hit us at 3. Not from the door we welded. From the storm drain vent we thought too small. The grate came up like it was paper. One pale hand, then another, then a long head like a blunt spear. We fired. It ducked. Another flanked the generator. Diaz yelled in a tone I'd never heard in him, high and pure. The flare went off by accident or fate, and the yard turned red. In the red, we saw them clearly for the first time. Not many. 3, maybe 4. Lean, scarred. Folds of skin where there used to be something that never healed right. Their backs had ridges like they'd grown without sun, bones wandering under the skin to find the way. They moved like they'd learned by watching us climb and run. Their mouths were open not like snarls, but like a thing trying to cool itself down after a sprint. Strings of spit hung and didn't break. We dropped one. It fell with a sound I don't want again. The others pulled back at once like they were tied together at the spine. They vanished into the black as if doors opened for them that we couldn't see. We had proof now and a body. Only when we went to drag it in, it was gone. Blood and a smear where the head had been, no tracks. The rain took those, or they moved in a way that didn't leave any we knew how to see. We didn't sleep after that, we couldn't. We sat with rifles and coffee that tasted like coins and thought of Harris and the drain, and we thought of the logbook line and a dead man's chicken scratch, locked the vents. Daylight made us brave or stupid, hard to tell the difference when you're tired. Reed decided we'd choke them at their throat. The outflow pipe the old fisherman had pointed at. If they were using that to move between the base and the rocks, we'd shove fire down it. Cole thought it through on a scrap of ration box. We set flares at this grate, draw them towards Sector C's access, then we blow the smaller tunnel by the laundry building. That collapse should shift the water table and force them out here. He tapped his finger on the outflow mouth on the crude map. We sit here with rifles and a satchel charge ready. Or, Diaz said, we cave the wrong throat and trap ourselves. Cole shrugged. That's the army, son. We moved fast because plans like that rot at the edges if you let them sit. I laid tripwire along the runway, remains with Diaz, Reed and Cole took the charge. We set the fuse with hands that remembered training, even as our heads felt like wet socks. The wind came up and brought wet sand in our teeth. We lit 2 flares and tossed them down the Sector C stairs. The red lit the slime into a moving wall. We rattled the cages with rifle butts. We shouted and then shut the door and pulled back. From the vents, a chorus started, low at first, then rising. Not roars, not howls. Calls. The kind animals use when they mean this way, food, now. Every hair on my neck stood up. We fell back to the laundry building and the access tunnel. Reed nodded. Cole set the charge like he'd done it since birth. We pulled the line to the safe angle. Fire in the hole, he said soft, and thumbed the plunger. The ground jumped. The building slumped like a bad knee. Dust roared out of the broken windows, and then a wave of wet air slammed us, as if the whole base exhaled. Somewhere, a pipe shrieked. The outflow by the point coughed brown water and then cleared. We ran to our positions above it on the rocks. We didn't wait long. Movement at the mouth of the pipe. First, hands. Then a face, pale and slick, eyes squinting in daylight like it stung harder than bullets. Behind it, shapes moved in a push of gray flesh. They were louder in daylight, not just breath. A rasp, like a small fire across dry leaves. Their skin showed scars on scars, some circular, some like ropes had burned them long and taught it to grow around the pain. We held fire until Reed said. He watched the lead one place, its hands like a gymnast testing a bar. He let it commit. Then he shot it just under the jaw, where bone is thin. It dropped without a tone. I took the second. Diaz fired 2, but his shots went wide. He steadied. We hit 3, but more kept coming, and for a half breath I thought, we're just making room at the mouth. Then the charge we'd set near the pipe went. It wasn't the big one. That was still in Cole's bag. This was a small kick meant to scare and shove. It worked. The mouth fell in on itself. 2 creatures got crushed slower than you'd want for anything with a heartbeat. The cry that went up wasn't words, not close, but it made something in me think of a man calling his friend's name and getting no answer. They pulled back again, always pulling back where the dark can swallow them. Hold, Reed said. He was bleeding from his forearm and didn't know it. We fell back to the tower in order, counting, checking, breathing. We'd won a thing that felt like a loss. Halfway up the old service road, the tarmac cracked under us. The structural failure Cole warned about hadn't finished. The blast tilted some underground wall, and now the earth wanted to sit a new way. The road dropped a foot with a stone cough. Diaz fell hard and twisted his ankle. He cursed a couple saints and the entire concept of gravity. Cole went to haul him up, and something thin and pale slipped from a drainage slit and grabbed Cole by the calf. He didn't yell. He slammed the butt of his rifle down and broke the fingers like twigs. The hand pulled back at speed, skin tearing with a sound you don't forget. I fired into the slit, wet thumps. The road shifted again. We scrambled the last stretch and got behind sandbags, our breathing a spread of bad harmonicas. We had one of them then, not alive, not whole. A forearm and part of a shoulder lay in the crack where the road had been. The skin ended in a torn edge with pale cartilage showing. The hand twitched twice and was still. Diaz, even hurt, took his little book and wrote something. He isn't a ghoul. He's a recorder. That day, we needed one. Cole said, they're guarding something deeper, or someone taught them to keep the channels. Reed nodded once. We're not doing this piecemeal, we're closing it. If we can't, we burn what we can touch and get to the water. As afternoon burned down to a bruise, we tried one more thing. We used meat. Don't call me cruel. You do what works. We cut ration pork into chunks, tied them, strung them to trip flares near the Sector C vent. We wanted one to show his head and get tangled. We got what we asked for. Near dusk, a pale face came up under the grate like a drowned boy. It sniffed and clicked its teeth like a metronome. It poked the meat once, twice. Then it opened its mouth wider than a mouse should go, the jaw unpinned with a soft pop and hung like a broken hinge. It pulled meat in without teeth, just a vacuum like a fish. Its eyes rolled white. It didn't look at us. It looked at the world the way a starving thing does. In that second I thought, there's a person in there. Then it saw the tripline. It shrieked. Not animal, not man, both. I shot. It thrashed and ripped the wire. The flare went off and cooked its face red. It clawed itself free, leaving strips of skin that fluttered like wet napkins. It didn't die right away. It stumbled and hit the base of the dish and curled like a baby. It made sounds that were not for us. It died with its hands up around its face like a person ashamed of how he looked. We went quiet after. Even Diaz didn't write. We didn't feel good. Cole put a blanket over the corpse because no one deserved the sky looking at them like that. Night came like it was paid to. The generator, our second one, coughed and died. No light but flares and the mean lamps we had rigged to batteries. The rain kicked up to a true storm, a hard slap that turned the yard to soup and the cliff path to grease. We decided to go through the underground for an alternate exit. The main road looked unsafe and the base itself had turned into a trap. The old boat dock to the east might still hold a patrol boat. We knew the path below through maps and rumor. We'd go down through Sector C, cut across the service tunnels and come up near the storage sheds by the inlet. We packed light and tight, Reed up front, me behind him, Diaz limping but moving, Cole bringing up the rear with his bad calf taped with cloth and cussed into obedience. We dropped into the red-lit stairwell. The stink was now the air. I breathed through my mouth and tasted pennies. We passed the cages and the desk with the logbook. I looked without wanting to, and the logbook lay open to a page I hadn't left it on. Diaz swore he had closed it earlier. The page showed the line again. Specimens 4 through 7 hostile. Below that, new ink. Fresh. The date wrong by decades. One word written careful, like the writer wanted each letter to count. Hungry. Move, Cole said, because sanity moves even when meaning wants to stop. We hit a flooded corridor. Water to the shins, cold enough to punch. Our lamps made sick rings on the surface. Something moved in the water like a fish. I told myself it was a rat with a good breaststroke. We got to the first junction and saw bones in the grate. Not human, I told myself, then saw the boot heel stuck between two ribs and knew the lie wasn't going to help. Diaz reached for the boot because the notebook in his chest demanded names for bones. Cole grabbed his wrist and shook his head. No time, son. We kept going. Doors opened and closed at the edges of our light. Not by magic, by weight. The building had settled and the hinges sang the wrong songs. The deeper we got, the clearer it became that the creatures were not monsters made by darkness and guilt. They were good at the place. That's worse. They knew where to walk on the pipes to make no sound. They knew which doors to slam to make you look left while they slid right. You could feel the intelligence like a cold coin laid behind your ear. Diaz started talking into the dead radio in a whisper, not to call anyone, to log. Sector corridor submerged. Structural compromise around Junction B. Unknown adversary displays coordinated tactics. He made it sound like normal. That helped for 2 minutes at a time. At one corner we found marks on the wall. Not scratches. Writing. Fingernail deep. In a neat hand that had once held a pen. It said, in English, "They fed us in the dark and told us we were saving the world." The last word dragged down where the hand ran out of strength. Reed stared a long second and then took a breath that sounded like a cough. He said, "Keep moving." His jaw was set like the metal wheel on the Sector C door. They hit us near a junction where the water ran waist high. A hand came up under my legs and grabbed. I went down to my armpits and the lamp went out. I kicked and hit cheekbone with my heel. It let go. Cole fired into the water in short bursts, controlled, like at a range. The muzzle flashes turned the water into a mirror. In some flashes, I saw pale shapes writhing against the current, mouths open, eyes half shut against light. Diaz slipped down a step and his notebook went floating. He lunged and grabbed it because that was who he was. A pale shape hit his shoulder and bit. He screamed the kind of scream your mother hears in her sleep miles away. Reed grabbed the thing by the neck and hauled it half out of the water and shot it in the eye. It went loose and slid away like a man too drunk to stand. Diaz's shoulder gushed. I tied a rag by feel and hoped it held. We reached a dry corridor and found a door with a big wheel like the first. This one had its wheel welded off. Beside it, small lockers held gear, masks with cracked lenses, gloves turned to powder. A box of vials empty but for one with a smear like old jam. A patient chart nailed crooked to the wall, listed doses and observation times in a tight, tidy hand. At the bottom, stamped in official ink, were the words, "Program concluded. Specimens relocated." Someone had drawn a face there in pencil. It looked like a child's scribble of a smile. Underneath the smile in neat script, another hand had written, "Liars." The air moved. Not wind, pressure shift, the way a crowd makes a room breathe. Reed signaled without words. We went. Past the door that would not open, past the lockers, down a corridor that sloped up. The smell lightened in the nose and deepened in the throat like going from a sewer to a slaughterhouse. We heard the ocean louder. That gave me strength I didn't own. At a T-junction, Cole stopped. He set his rifle down. He looked at all of us one by one with that old, tired eye. "I'll hold here," he said. He didn't ask. "You take Diaz and the kid," he meant me, I guess, even then, "and you run like hell when I say go." "No," I said, "because sometimes you say the dumbest true word." He cut me off with that voice. "I'm the one with the leg that won't and the arm that hurts. I'm the one who knows how to slow a thing down." He had a sack with 2 sticks of explosive left and a handful of caps. He grinned. "Besides, I got a date with the bastards." He said it like a man finally about to get a drink he'd been promised too long. Reed put his hand on Cole's shoulder. Nothing else. Soldiers got a handshake. Cole didn't want one. We set Diaz between us. He had gone quiet. The book was in his shirt again. Blood turned his sleeve black. We heard the first note of them then. A chorus from below that made the skin on my arms try to hide. Cole smiled at the sound. "Go," he said. We went. We didn't look back. The corridor bent and the ocean was louder, and then the base shook like a hand swatting a fly. Dust filled the light. The sound came late, a thud that would have dropped us if we weren't already moving. We didn't hear Cole after. We didn't need to. Some men carry you out without stepping. We reached the old boat dock in full storm. The cove churned like a pot. The radar tower loomed behind on the bluff, lit by lightning and bone-white flashes. The dock boards were soft and rotten. A small patrol boat sat moored crooked, half sunk, half stubborn. We jumped aboard and started hands-on. Diaz found the fuel lever and prayed in Spanish. Reed yanked starter cord until his shoulder popped. I worked the bilge with a rusted pump that might have been a coffee can with dreams. The engine coughed. It caught. It coughed again. We didn't have time to beg it. We had creatures coming down the rocks, sure-footed in a way that made me hate them fresh all over. They moved like they'd been born to slippery stone. 2 came in from the surf, heads barely out of water, arms windmilling slow like weird swimmers. Reed shoved me toward the bow line. Cast off. I ripped the knot and kicked the board loose. Diaz hauled a rope with one arm and kept the other clamped to his wound. The engine spit a cloud that smelled like 1,000 cigarettes. We edged from the dock and then slammed back with a wave. The boat complained. A pale hand hit the gunwale and slid. Another got purchase. I stepped and stomped and felt something give under my boot. The creature came up once, eyes white, mouth working, and I drove the butt of my rifle into its teeth. They broke like chalk. It dropped and came again. A shot at point blank. The muzzle flash lit its throat red and then black. It fell back and the wave took it, but 2 more were there, and one of them dragged the first down the way a friend hauls a friend who can't make it. On the dock, 3 more appeared. One moved upright with its hands held low like a man who broke his back walking. It cried, not a scream, a cry. It messed with my aim, and I hate it for that. Reed didn't hesitate. He shot it twice. It fell and the cry didn't stop right away. It faded though, until the wind swallowed it. The engine caught for real. The bow turned. We swung out while the stern kissed the dock a last time and tore a plank. The plank came with us and then broke free. The wave took us into the throat of the cove and then tried to spit us back onto the rocks. "Charges," Reed said. He meant the last bag, the last iron pea that might buy us a breath. He was bleeding at the flank and I didn't know when that had started. I pulled the bag and fumbled the cap with hands that felt like I'd borrowed them from a dead kid. Diaz helped with his left, his right hanging like rope. He smiled through his teeth. "We don't miss," he said to no one. Reed took the bag and looked at the base. The radar tower leaned into the storm, old dish shaking. The outflow pipe area smoked where we had crushed it. Sector C sat under there, under concrete, under 40 years of lies. Reed wrapped the fuse around a plank, lit it with a flare, and chucked the whole mess toward the dock. It landed on wet wood and slid toward a crack. Perfect. Wrong. Fate bold as brass. Lightning hit the tower. For a breath, the sky was white and the world was paper and we were pencil marks. The charge blew. Not huge. A cough that made the dock hiccup, but something else went with it. Something we had loosened with all our stupid brave work. The ground under the tower sagged. The dish tilted and fell like a slow guillotine. The base moaned like an animal. The world swallowed a section of itself. Concrete and rebar and old promises collapsed. A wave of air hit us, and then a sound rolled over the water like a boulder across a church. Behind that came screams. Not human, not animal, but the music I will hear when I close my eyes the last time. You could feel it in your bones like a second worse skeleton. We slid out into the breakers while shapes moved on the shore. I saw them in lightning. Silhouettes along the cliff edge, thin and long, hands hanging heavy, heads cocked in a way an ape does when it tries to puzzle rain. They didn't jump in after us. They stayed. They watched. Fire flashed near Sector C's vents, then steam. Then nothing but storm. The boat engine threatened to give up and die in the first true swell. Reed stood like a man on an electric floor and gunned it at the right time. The bow crested and slammed. If I had faith then, it was in the physics of boats and the mean joy of survival. Diaz laughed once like a cough and then went quiet. I checked him. He still breathed. Something hit the stern like a log with fingers. I turned and saw a face at the wake. Gray eyes. Not killing eyes. Hunger eyes, sure, but something else. Something that asked, I don't have mercy left in me in stories like this. I fired into the water until the face sank and the color there turned thinly wrong. Reed pulled the throttle and we cleared the mouth of the cove. Ahead, the ocean opened like a black field with white fences. Behind, the base exhaled more dust than breath. We aimed for open water and lights we couldn't see. The storm made a roof of the world. We pushed anyway because what else do you do? Dawn came like an apology, weak, yellow, and thin. The storm dragged its tail across the horizon and then quit. We drifted more than drove. The boat engine coughed into a sulk and finally stopped. We sat with wet clothes and salt sticky in our eyelids. Diaz's shoulder looked like raw meat. He shook when he looked at it and then didn't look again. Reed wrapped it with the last clean strip we had and said nothing that would be a lie. We were found by a Coast Guard cutter around midday. A white hull out of fog, horn low. Men leaned over and called and were good and normal in a way that felt like indecency after the night. They hauled us aboard. They looked at our faces and the blood and the gear and said nothing for a long minute. One finally asked where we came from. Reed said, Camp Hero. The man's face closed in a way only federal faces close. He nodded once and turned to tell the captain. They took our statements that afternoon. Not on the deck. In a room that smelled like oil and lemon cleaner. A man with a suit on a ship is a special kind of omen. He had a pen and a blank face and asked each question twice to see if our answers wandered. Reed told it flat. He left out guesses and words like monster. He said things like hostile entities and compromised structure and the death of Sergeant Cole in the line of duty. Diaz added a few details from his little book. The man in the suit asked to see the book. Diaz gave it over. The man read for a time with his lips moving. Then he placed it on the table and slid his hand across it. This is now part of the record, he said. What record, I asked, because I was young and dumb enough to think honesty had a place. He smiled like a bad photograph. the one that keeps people from telling stories that hurt them. He slid a paper across with lines at the bottom for our names. Words up top about secrecy and acts and penalties that read like somebody had put numbers on a gun pointed at your foot. We signed. We kept our feet. They called it a training accident. Structural collapse. That's what made the paper. A week later, the base was fenced with brand new chain and fresh locks, the kind that bite if you climb. A month later, they buried the vent mouths under concrete poured at night. If you go to Montauk now, you'll see a park sign and a radar tower that tourists take pictures of. They don't see the weld lines. They gave Reed a quiet metal and a louder warning. He took both like the same weight. He stayed in because some men only know how to eat bad food and carry heavy things. Diaz got a medical and went home to Texas. He wrote letters for a while and then stopped. I think the stopping was the best thing he did for himself. Me, I got out after a few more years. Work like that eats the bones soft. I married a girl who laughed at my hard face and got a job that didn't ask me to hold a rifle. Life grew around the places that didn't grow back. That's a trick too. Decades later, you hear things. A cleanup crew sent to check soil around an old foundation. A man who breaks off his drill bit for no good reason and prees with his fingers and pulls out a piece of concrete where the inside marks don't match the outside form. He takes that chunk to light and sees a line scratched across the inner face. A single claw mark, deep as a thumbnail sunk into wet clay once, long time ago before it dried. He laughs and says, "Kids." Then he runs his finger along it and cuts himself on the edge, sharp as glass after all these years. He says nothing then. He drops it back in the hole and kicks dirt over it and goes home early. So that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.